worry about too much of cost. That's really important. Trying to make the game really boring. So as I said, Zbrush is industry standard. It's in everything. You will be using this if you ever work in miniatures, if you ever work in toy design, movies, or anything really. It's not just kind of just for games. I don't think it even started out as a game kind of central thing. It's all for films, but it's kind of been adopted over the past like 15 years into everything. And it's the same kind of thing with Unreal. So everyone, I'm sure, has heard of Unreal Engine. Yeah, just did an Unreal session. So that obviously we kind of like use that as games. But realistically, like the Mandalorian was filmed with an Unreal sound stage, which is quite cool. And yeah, loads of stuff uses Unreal now. So same with Zbrush. So every industry kind of has their things behind Zbrush. I think I'm sculpting an alien. I think I'm just trying to awesome chat to sculpting an alien. And my sensitivity is there. That's interesting. So I'm going to make some kind of alien with some paint maybe. My skin for some reason. I like realism. I like realistic looking kind of freaky aliens. That's what I wanted to sculpt. So I do a lot of realism. My background's in miniatures and kind of, I guess in essence TV and film, but a lot of it is very much special effects. But you'll find that everything is kind of used the same. I'm just going to load this up and do this again.
It's not quite misbehaving.
Yes. Just seems to be, I can't reinitialize it, but it seems to be the sensitivity is just gone.
There's one thing that I will give everyone a quick warning of. A lot of the software that you use on a day-to-day basis, like commercial things like word processors or web browsing things, they're consumer-grade products. They're meant to be quite stable. A lot of game development stuff is not. It does not get the same amount of testing, it does not get the same amount of QA, it does not get the same amount of bug fixes. Learning how to deal with your software crashing is probably about 15 to 20% of the job.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that like that's addicted to the quality of like gear or anything, that's just generally how it is.
Yeah.
You'll find that like a lot of studios as well like will not adopt the very latest versions of things straight away, like Unreal and stuff, because they need to have it stable for like the game release and things. But it's always good to prime you to learn these things as well. So we're an Unreal trainer. We get the latest and greatest on Unreal stuff. But as I say, any software that we actually use, it's all industry standard. Other big expenses as well. We were just discussing about how expensive Zbrush is.
Yeah.
To actually have as a bit of software for marketing.
So it's one of those things where our stance on software is whatever the industry is using is whatever we're using. We'll pay for licenses, we'll buy the hardware. If it's something that you will need to get a job or to work in the industry as it is right now, then yes, we will spend the money on it. Now, we have seen a bunch of other institutions who will try to save money where possible by going for alternatives. So Zbrush is, I think it's £795 for a license. The student versions that we would be buying are a bit cheaper. I think they're about half the price. So that's still about 400 quid a license, and we have about 180 of them. I've seen other institutions say, well, hang on a second, Mudbox, the version of sculpting software made by Autodesk, you can get that for free as an education institution. So that's a bunch of money we just wouldn't have to spend. But to be frank, have any of you ever heard of Mudbox? Yeah, there's a reason for that. It's not particularly good, it's not being used in industry. From our perspective, if we teach you that, we're setting you up to fail, so we don't teach it. We will spend the money.
You told me that on my laptop.
Oh, Tom. I'm so sorry.
Well, I did special effects, so it's a bit different.
You should have come to Staff's
I
talent.
should have come to Staff's indeed, but it was a decade ago. But yeah, so basically, alongside that, I think have you seen the motion capture room? I'm a bit out of source as to where people are. That's cool. So you've done the motion capture stuff. So we also, alongside that, probably in the same vein, we've got a laser scanning kind of like system as well. So a big part of Zbrush and the work especially with game art is to use a laser scanner to kind of like bring the raw data in. So you see a lot of the characters and things like the last cast and stuff like that will be from scan data. What's quite fun is that we have access to pretty much the same stuff, so we can kind of like showcase that off. And I've used it a few times. I've actually played some really interesting looking public boards that I've used for live drawing, live sculpting. But one of my colleagues as well, last time, also scanned in one of their sculptures.
This is where you go in life, you want as well.
This is why you gotta come back. We can
So this is another lecturer. This is their work. So this is something they did. So they actually had a clay sculpture of this like lovely, and then game artists is about finalising that one option and making it really, really polished and good. Cool. So as you can see, I've made my lumpy alien. I'm going to see how far I can push before it shouts at me to say I can't push it anymore.
Starting to remind me a little bit of the sectoids from X2.
I've not played X-Code, but I do know a lot about it because I gave a big lecture on all of the stuff for it. Because they had to really figure out things like how big is a door, and how big can that make the enemies, and how much can you see on the screen at any time. All that stuff is really interesting. But yeah, it's got a bit of a lumpy reptilian face. So one thing I'm doing when I'm sculpting, which I haven't really covered, is reference. I'm being a bit naughty here and just kind of not using any specific reference, but the reason being is because I'm doing this for a really long time. So the reference is all in my brain. I really love animals and all that kind of stuff, so I'm always drawing them and sketching them anyway. So really just put them out. But if you need reference, you can go on Google, lots of images. I didn't know what Google looked like, so I had to pull up an image from Google. I know they're simple, but I don't play with Mario games, so the subtleties of a Gumbo are really
As a sentence you'll never hear again, by the way.
It may be a sentence that's never been said before. The subtleties of a Gumbo are really. So as well, I'm seeing a lot of stuff around the room, which is great. If you want to, you can change the colour of your, or even the material of your sculpt. So we can go here, we can put it in a bunch of different materials. At the minute, it'll be on Macan or basic. Gold. Toy plastic. Toy plastic is quite fun. Quite cool. You can change the colour as well. Maybe specific use. Nice specularity as well from the material. So we're using, in this case, toy plastic, so it's got that sheen. When I take stuff into actual Zbrush, I always have toy plastic on the eyes because it makes the eyes kind of shiny, which I think is really useful for differentiating shapes. But as you can see, I'm just blocking out those forms, thinking about the muscle structures, thinking about what it would be, how it would function as a realistic thing. If you want to carve away, if you haven't figured it out, so if you want to say Alt will do that. So Alt is the reverse of the brush. Alt. Kind of invert your brush and carve away. So, does anyone have any questions about Zbrush or about the Uni or anything like that? About what you do, about what jobs you can get, about the software that we've got.
Can you use Zbrush for anything apart from like character
You can. So this version of Zbrush, which is just the smaller one, doesn't have any of the extras a part of Zbrush called Zmodeler, which is pretty robust for doing hard edge model making. So you can do, or hard edge modeling. So you can do like weapons, you can do like vehicles, you can do whatever really. It didn't really used to have a good setup for that, and I still think that, I think it's really good. But because people are quite used to using Blender or 3D Max or something like that, they're resistant to kind of like changing teams. But I actually think it's pretty robust in terms of like doing it. It's almost like Lego, in that kind of thing. You can also do a lot of things that are a lot harder to do in other softwares, like cleaning up like scan data and stuff like that. Is really useful. Just out of pure kind of side note. I don't raise your hand if you've heard of it. Has anyone ever heard of Luba, the woolly mammoth? No. So Luba was a little woolly mammoth died thousands of years ago, but was in the permafrost, and they had laser scan data of it, and it was freely available. So I downloaded it, and I cleaned it up, and I 3D printed all kind of the scan data. And I like to do that as well. So I've actually got the dinosaurs from what is it in London? The dinosaurs, the old park, the old Victorian ones. Can't remember what it's called. Sorry. In the gardens. But there's these big old sculptures of dinosaurs in London that are from Victorian times, and someone had laser scanned them in, and again made freely available. So I've 3D printed miniature versions of them for my desk.
Do you have anything to show here?
Do I have any to show here? I don't actually have any on me. But other than like what Emily did. So Emily scanned another one of her. So she sculpted this. So she hand sculpted this, and then laser scanned it in. And we can 3D print that if we wanted to, make it smaller or bigger or whatever. I designed some pumpkins that I used to sell. I used to sell as little STL files, and someone in America 3D printed them 500% larger for like Halloween decorations. I thought it was really cool. So they had like all of my pumpkin designs that were all over their garden. That was really fun. I'll show you.
You can do here,
Yeah, we can do. Yeah, so at the uni we've got we've got a 3D printer that is really super expensive that prints in full color. So you can basically design game ready stuff and then just print it, and it will print the model without any supports. It's weird. It prints it in like a gel, and it injects it with color at the same time, so it prints out a full color version. And then we have a kind of more standard resin printer, which is the 4x4, which is pretty cheap for you guys. You don't have to pay for materials, so it only ever costs like a few pounds to print out like miniatures like this. Weird, £2 or something like that. Very small. But yeah, so we have all that 3D printing like tech, and they're always itching to print interesting stuff, because I think most of the time it's the product engineers that go, can you print out this hinge or this latch, and they're like, okay. Whereas I'm like, I've laser scanned. Well, I've got a scan data of vampire bat skull. Can we print it like 500% bigger, so we can have a big vampire bat skull? And they're like, yes you can. So I get them to print that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've been using Zbrush for a long time as well, which is it's a miniature that I did. We can also see the pumpkin king. You see the process. There's my little sketch that I did. There's the 3D model. And then I printed it out. That's actually a casting drawing, but effectively print. And that's the final like product. And so on. So, I do that a lot. So I tend to be the one that problem solves a lot of like creature artists when they want to print out their work, so we can get it ready for graphics and the shows and stuff, which is quite fun.
We did have that last year. One of our third year character students made a 3D sculpted model of one of the xenomorphs from Alien, and they 3D printed out like a model of it that was about this big, and they just left it on their desk throughout Gradex. Got a lot of attention.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Because it's just something physical that's there. I think as much as we like digital work, I think that nothing goes faster than a meeting where you have a physical model to kind of show off. And nothing gets more attention than something that's not on a screen. Because people are just interested to see what you've done. So I'm always, I think you get a different appreciation for your artwork as well. If you're a purely digital artist, you start to kind of see it either printed out on the walls or made and printed, painted, whatnot. I think it makes you more appreciative of your artwork. Cool. Yeah, we covered last time. What did we talk about last time? I can't remember.
Well, the other thing I think we already spoke about was the applications of Zbrush for games art in particular. So as you can kind of see from the screen, it is quite popular for character art because ever since the first Uncharted game came out, and Naughty Dog were the ones that really, I don't know if they were the first studio to make use of Zbrush for games, but they were definitely one of the big pioneers of it that really got its name out there. Ever since then, a lot of studios adopted it. It's been used for characters just about everywhere, and it has remained pretty much a constant ever since then. Even though workflows adapt and they evolve, there was a time when character artists would sculpt everything from scratch for every project. These days, we're starting to see more and more scan data being used, but at the same time, it's being cleaned up and worked on in Zbrush after the fact. So has anyone here played Death Stranding? Okay, so the first piece of advice is play Death Stranding, it's good. Secondly, for the actual production of that game, Hideo Kojima, the main developer of it, basically got all his celebrity friends into a scanning studio, and they used this system called photogrammetry, where they had this big kind of like sphere made out of cameras that all got activated on the same mechanism. They got the actors to sit there and do neutral expressions, like facial expressions, lots and lots of those. Took loads of pictures of them at the same time, and then created a 3D model from that. And afterwards, took it to ZBrush, cleaned it up, got it game ready, and used it for the actual game. So even though technology is always changing, ZBrush is pretty much a constant. You will end up back here one way or another. But it's not just characters. Environment art uses it all the time as well. So if you're making an organic looking scene, if you're making something that's made out of organic materials, like a castle or an old temple, or you're making some woods or something like that, you will want to go in and sculpt those details. You would not want to polymodel individual bits of erosion or chips or bricks or things like that. It would be living hell. So for those two particular pipelines, it's pretty big. The only real way you kind of escape this is if you do hard surface modeling, but even then you don't truly escape it. It finds a way to get back to you one way or another. So if you make guns, more often than not, people will take them in, they'll add scratches or small little sort of details to the surface using ZBrush. If you make a car, you might think, why would you ever sculpt a car? You wouldn't, but the seats maybe and the interiors. If you've got the handbrake and the gear stick, if they've got leather on them, which most of the time they do, yeah, you got to sculpt that. So one way or another, this thing is very much it's like a slasher villain. You think you've escaped it, and then it kicks your door down and says, no, it's ZBrush time.
They did use the hand stuff in cars.
That the thought terrifies me now.
They used the hand stuff in play. And they still do it for some cases. It's very expensive to use.
That terrifies me. Fair play to them, but I would not.
I'm talking the full size one. They knew stop that. They still stop that. They're their practice. I think a lot of them do that. Because it's really difficult to understand something fully. It's put on a screen to see how it feels.
myself. I don't know what some people are writing software seems to be down in when you're trying to put down.
That's creepy.
Like the pens, pencils.
It's good though.
It's related to directors or OpenGL.
Yes, sir. Other than stuff that, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
It's not really.
They also seem like something that would be striking things for some reason.
That's one of his things.
I don't even know. I'm just messing around with
You're
the
just messing
tools.
around with it, that's cool, that's how you learn.
there's definitely going on there.
Doing some cool stuff.
I have no idea.
What a beautiful
I genuinely
build.
have no idea whatsoever. However,
I'm proud of that, I really am.
what's also weird is that actually from
Did you look at the cat? What? Were you looking at cards?
I was doing the set for the salary.
Would you not be friends Is it scarier as a fly, or is it scarier as like this, like,
Zbrush is really good. It will run on seemingly a potato, so you don't really need to have particularly hot computer to be able to run it. It's kind of, I guess, but it's just very, very compact. It's very, very. It does one thing very well. So I'm sure you probably use Blender. Blender can be a bit heavy going as soon as you start to get large models, whereas ZBrush is more efficient. So this is my Gary. Fred.
Oh my god, it's zoomed in so far when the